Healthworks podcast, recorded from Obama Magnet Elementary. In this podcast, we don't just talk about compost, we break it down to other topics and speak to some Mississippi locals doing incredible work. I am Caleb Norwood, one of your hosts for today. Before we get started, I want to share something interesting I learned this week. We need to clean up the earth because it is killing sea animals like turtles. Well, that's all I have for now. I will now pass it on to my co host, Eden. We have no time to waste.
Hi, I'm Iden and welcome to our first segment of the podcast called No Time to Waste. In this segment, we'll give you an example of items you can compost. In today's segment of No Time to Waste, the compostable items are dead leaves and flowers. Sometimes the green fades and flowers wither away, and that's okay. This isn't necessarily the end of life, but a new beginning when you compost dead plants and flowers. Even with a green thumb, withering plants happens. In a city like Jackson, urban gardens is one way to improve your gardening skills. You can grow foods in your yard, container gardens, window sills, rooftops, and apartment balconies. Gardening has been part of Black culture for centuries. There's so much history about it.
Hi, I'm Denali Parker.
And I'm Welsey P.
Welcome to our next podcast called So Much History. In this podcast segment, we give you fun facts on the topic of the day. Since we are speaking of gardening,
Did you know that in spite of many restrictions, gardening was popular among the enslaved throughout the South?
did you know that gardening was a major way the enslaved had other food options like kale and tomatoes?
Did you know that some states allow enslaved to sell their harvest?
Did you know many enslaved African Americans had knowledge of growing crops because of the crops grown in Africa?
Do you know these are all fun facts I have for today? It's now time for me to pass the mic to my co-host Bayleigh.
Hi, I'm Bayleigh, and welcome to the final segment of the podcast, The Interviews. During this segment, we will talk about local Mississippians and learn about their work. We will be interviewing entrepreneurs, farmers, gardeners, and more. We hope that you'll gain more knowledge and leave inspired. Today, we will learn more from DJ Baker, a local urban gardener.
How did you get into gardening?
I got into gardening as a teenager with my twin brother and my mom. We decided to start a garden. My mother and uncle, my parents grew up gardening, so they already had some knowledge. But my mom and I, and my brother, we just said, hey, we want to start doing a garden in the backyard. And we did it. We took some old wood pieces and put up and made a raised bed and just got some dirt and kept it going.
What kind of things did you grow in your garden?
We grew all kinds of stuff. Of course, stuff that I think originates in Africa, like watermelon and okra, was some of our favorite things to grow. We grew beans, we grew tomatoes and peppers, cabbage. We grew all kinds of stuff. My mom loves a variety of things, so we grew a variety of things.
What's your favorite thing?
I don't necessarily have a favorite thing to plant. But I mean, I guess if I had to choose something, I would say fruit trees. Fruit trees are a lot of fun, from like apples to persimmons to blueberries, blackberries, crab apples. Fruit trees are it's a whole nother endless world in gardening. So if you do like fruits, fruit trees is definitely a whole nother avenue.
What advice do you have to anyone who may say they don't have a green thumb?
I would say just go out there and start planting. I wouldn't consider myself a green thumb. I just started learning the science, the techniques, and I also would say find a mentor. I got to learn from different gardeners actually here in the area, like Felder Rushing or Nellie Neal. Also, she's known as Garden Mama. They both have their own radio shows. They've both written multiple gardening books. To combine, I think they've both written over 40 gardening books, and they've been in gardening for, again, combined over probably 50, 60 years. So I'd say find a mentor, find a friend, and continue learning.
What advice do you have for anyone who may not have much space to plant things outside?
I would say find maybe a community space that you may have. Also, pots are always an option. 5-gallon buckets are always an option. So container gardening is typically an option. Sometimes it's just a small plant by your windowsill. Then that's whatever makes you happy. Try. You can probably find opportunity out there. If not, create the opportunity.
What are some of your favorite tips when it comes to gardening?
Some of my favorite tips. I guess one of my favorite tips is one thing that people always are trying to figure out is how deep do I plant the seed? So I always say plant the seed 2 to 4 times its size is pretty much the standard. So if your seed is an inch big, then plant it 2 to 4 inches. If your seed is half an inch, then you're going to plant it excuse me, an inch to 2 inches. So about 2 to 4 times its size, and also gives you a good opportunity to practice your multiplication, because I figured that's what y'all still learning at this point.
Did you have a garden while growing up?
From a teenager, I did. From my teen years and up, yes. But I will say I do have a very cherished childhood memory. I was about probably 5 years old. I was in my great aunt and great uncle's backyard. They had a garden and they had the best strawberries. Still to this day, I have not had a strawberry that has tasted that good. But it's one of my very favorite and cherished memories of growing up around my family and like the best strawberry I've ever had.
For our last question, is there any advice you would like to give us before we close?
I would say keep learning, keep growing, keep experimenting. And if you do find a particular passion in gardening that you have, keep learning and going after that. Again, the avenues of gardening, you can get into so many specifics. Some people like just growing stuff during the winter. Some people like growing fruit trees. Some people like just growing herbs. Some people like growing seeds. So seed gardening is a whole nother thing. There's some gardeners and farmers out there, all they do is they plant so that they can grow seed, and then they can package and store the seeds, and then they become seed farmers and sellers.
What a great interview. Well, this concludes today's episode of HealthWorks Podcast. I can't wait to chat with you next time as we discuss even more nutrient-rich matters. See you later.